edition of the Omnis Tower. Put that lovely music in the background a little more. I was so happy to find a version of that piece that had escaped from jail to some rights holder. Very, very beautiful performance by Alicia de la Rocha, wonderful Spanish pianist, one of the best interpreters of the works of Enrique Granados, of which this piece is my favorite. Okay, while we're on the subject of talking about backgrounds, I'm going to lead into this talk. I'll give you the name of it and then explain how this interesting collage of artwork behind me ties into it. I'm going to title this one, The First CEO of Macrosoft, How God's First Programs Nearly Drove Him as Crazy as Bill Gates. You'll notice there's actually three AI-drawn art pieces behind you. I started out, the middle one is its response to Bill Gates playing 5D chess against Baphomet. And I thought it was interesting that they drew Baphomet as a funny little nicey character, and Bill Gates kind of was the same character, only halfway off the thing with a little bit of a Santa Claus hat on. So I thought that was not quite enough to convey what I was going after, but it kind of led me to a new idea, which resulted in this image you see on the left. This is actually the same request, but with a different set of parameters. And you see the whole chess motive was completely gone, and it just drew Bill Gates as Baphomet, which I thought was a pretty good representation. Interesting. And then on the right, that made me think of an old movie that you may not have seen, but you might remember from the 70s called Oh God. It was a comedy that basically had George Burns, great comic actor, playing God. And the story was that some Numby cat suddenly started getting visions from God, telling him to do this, do that, and kind of a retelling of the Jesus Christ story, only with John Denver as the Jesus character. Very popular movie in its age, one which was entertaining and maybe semi-informative, but it was also kind of rooted in a fallacy, a mistake, a misunderstanding, a misapprehension that is really core to understanding where I'm going with all of my content. And that's why I keep beating on it. Okay, so let's start with fundamental, basic concepts. Remind you that I talk about creation as being a product of thought. Thought creates matter, not the other way around. Your brain doesn't make you think. Your brain makes you think you think. Your soul is where the consciousness is. That's why consciousness can be retained through incarnation after incarnation, although we have this feature of incarnation known as reincarnation amnesia, which for the most part keeps us unaware of our past life history. So many of us are not aware of having any more than one incarnation. And this is kind of a great leveler of the game of souls, because new souls are being created all the time as more conscious souls consciously start playing against the rules of the universe they're in. They start mucking with somebody else's game, and they get sent to another chessboard, which is why I wanted it to show 5D chess, even though it's a 12D game. It's hard enough to understand 3D chess. uh, which is in the image behind me from, I think it was introduced as a Star Wars concept. Star Trek concept. Spock liked to play as 3D chess. And I guess somebody invented a game to go with it, and now that's still played. And you can buy 3D chess boards. Don't know what the rules of it are, wouldn't even begin to guess. Never played it myself. But it makes a good background for understanding what's going on. Okay, so why do I talk about the first CEO of Macrosoft? Okay, imagine, if you will, God being the first soul that woke up and said, I think I'm me. I think, therefore I am. Started having imaginative thoughts, creating ideas, exploring new ideas. In a very broad sense. That's where Macrosoft comes from. If you know the difference between macro and micro, okay, macro thinking is thinking on a big scale, thinking on a broad canvas. Micro, soft, is very focused on, and started its company, Bill Gates began his whole adventure very focused on making a lot of money as quickly as he could, any way he could. And if you don't know the origin story of the Dark Jedi Bill Gates, who I like to call Bull Goats, in honor of his association with Baphomet, which is basically the goat Satan of Luciferian worshippers, satanic worshippers. He made his big splash by getting in good with the folks that were on the leading edge of creating computers in one of the schools that had some of the most creative minds, University of Washington, my alma mater, in fact. I was actually there at about the same time, so I know a lot about this. In fact, surprise of surprises, I faced the same temptation that Bull Goats did to get involved in this early Ponzi scheme, which maybe I'll get into a little later. But basically how he made his name was getting involved with these proto developers of hardware and software, operating systems, because that's all basically that software was at that point, is something to put on top of the hardware to make it easier for others to program. That's what an operating system fundamentally is. One of his buddies had created a hobbyist computer called an Altair and created this operating system that allowed this Altair thing to be programmed in a language called BASIC. Probably never heard of BASIC. You've probably never heard of all the old languages, Fortran, COBOL, etc. You've probably heard of languages like C and C++, Python, Java. Okay, languages have their own evolution too. So basically, Bill Gates knew his friend was doing something pretty innovative in the operating system front with his project to make a really neat computer for hobbyists who wanted to have a computer that they could get down and mess with the nuts and bolts and not be locked into only what the big company, the Apples and the IBMs of the world, would let them do with their machines. Mr. Gates had contacts with IBM folks, and he knew that they were looking for an operating system for their new computer, which was going to be an attempt to lock everybody in their home, in their office, into using IBM computers, like they were locked in using the big mainframe IBM computers in the big businesses before that. This was an age when computers were getting smaller, and folks were starting to realize that, boy, these things are getting small enough and powerful enough that, the big corporations, power companies, governments, etc., aren't going to be the only ones that have computers. And if we want to make the most money, we better start figuring out how we're going to sell computers to people and lock them in the same way that we locked the other corporations into using our computers. And that was the name of the game then. This is what IBM, Cray, all the big Apollo, all this big supercomputer, heavy computer iron companies and countries were engaged in, cornering the market. So Mr. Gates took this operating system that gave the end user BASIC to work with and a command thing called DOS, which was much better than some of the things that preceded it. As anyone who's ever known what it's like to use VI and the old style Unix command line to do anything will attest to. The Unix world was more open, but it had roots that were much more arcane than DOS and BASIC. By the way, how I know all this, I spent most of my career, my corporate career, working for companies like HP and National Semiconductor, Fairchild Semiconductor, Motorola. I know some of this shit. Interestingly enough, I also spent a fair amount of my time being an actor, so I know a lot of the shit of the guy on the right too. I guess he's on your right, or maybe he's on your left. I don't know which way you're going to see it. At any rate, Bill Gates made his money, made his company, founded it based upon theft and lies. And that has characterized his glory ever since. And many people look to him in the business community as an example of, well, fake it till you make it. Do whatever it takes. The end justifies the means. This is Baphomet thinking. This is Luciferian thinking. The guy on the right was just as, this was an actor on in his years, thought he'd never get another leading role. And he gets offered the chance to play God. Opposite a musician that's not really much of an actor. What wouldn't you sign up for that and make a whole bunch of money looking good no matter what you did, because you're an experienced vaudeville comedian and you've got some pop star against you that's just reading lines and looking stupid playing his part. And that was part of the whole underlying message of that movie, is to make Jesus, the Jesus character, look like an absolute idiot, and the God character look like, well, a guy that makes being an idiot fun. This powerful, wonderful guy that tells good jokes so you can forgive him for all the bad shit he did. And was the core of a lot of the jokes in that movie. I'll leave it to you to go watch it. I'm not going to do any more spoilers. But just to give you a sense of where we're coming from here. Okay, so where I'm going with this is that the real God is not the God you think God is. If God were an almighty, micromanaging authoritarian that could control everything, that planned everything, that made everything perfect, and you're just mucking it up because you're not perfect, that would be Bill Gates' God. That would be this funny God who thinks it's really funny to have people suffering, people uncertain, because they're just kind of stupid and they're kind of comical when you watch them. And as long as you're the one watching and not the one suffering, it's all good fun. And that's kind of Hollywood's approach to God. Doesn't really change the idea of God much at all. It just makes the viewer God. Oh, you can watch the screen, you can look at your phone, and because whatever you're looking at isn't hurting you, then it must be God. It must be good. And that's kind of the sick thing about human technology at our present state of evolution. Let me tell you that the real God has done all this, has been through all this, and everything that the human species, this chosen species of humanity, is going through has all been done before. Variations on a theme, though, not exactly. And if you listen to my other content, I will explain to you in detail exactly why humanity has the characteristics it does, why it only lives an average of about 72 years instead of 1,000 years, why we have reincarnation amnesia, why we don't really understand what karma is, or have any understanding of what happens after we die, or we have multiple understandings and nobody can agree on them. This is all very sensibly part of a plan that was outlined, conceived by the real God, and implemented by all his children. I'm going to tell you now about some of his early children. The one I talk about most, and sometimes I'll credit her with being his first child because she's the first one that, maybe the first one that he's proud enough of to actually own up to her, is Karma. Karma was conceived of as a program, a learning program, an AI that would learn how to manage other AIs and sort them to where they were most useful. Okay? Now, why would he come up with that? Well, actually, he was like most programmers, most idea men. When you start having big ideas, and those big ideas lead to, well, let's see, if I want to, for instance, let's give an example. If I want to build a new computer, I've got to figure out what operating system I'm going to use. I've got to figure out what CPU I'm going to use. I've got to figure out what memory I'm going to use. I've got to figure out what graphics processor I'm going to use, etc., etc., etc. And what sort of other things I'm going to allow to be interfaced with it. USB drives, Bluetooth, etc., etc. Okay? It's a very basic concept to think you want to have a computer, but it's actually got a lot of stuff to it to actually have one that's useful and that anybody will want to buy compared to the competing computers. Now imagine God is a manufacturer of souls. He's seen himself, I'm going to call myself a soul. I want to figure out the best way to make other souls that can do what I want them to. Because I have all these ideas and thoughts, and they lead to other thoughts. And what I really want to think about is souls. I don't want to have to think about all these other details. I want somebody that can take over that stuff so I don't have to worry about that. And just like the Bill Gates of the world, the Steve Jobs of the world, they found other people that could do what they couldn't. Folks that could do the software, folks that could do the hardware, folks that specialized in marketing and PR and legal, everything else that they didn't want to focus on. and they delegated that work. This is exactly how computers work. They delegate tasks to other things that are specialized for the task. They tell them roughly how they want it done, and then they wait for them to come back. If you want to retrieve some bit of memory, some previous results, you store it in your memory, and when you need it, you go ask the memory, give me that bit of information back. This is how very simplistic AIs work. They have a lot of memory and a lot of ideas about what it means for you to give it back. And that's why they will give you things like this that seem very, very innocuous on the front, but actually have quite a bit of programming, and not only hard programming, but cultural programming built into them. Oh, people might be offended if we drew this other character as a scary demon, so we'll make him a fun little cartoon character. And they might not want us to show Bill Gates' face here for the other player. Let's just make him like half Santa Claus, so he might be the Grinch or he might be Santa Claus. You don't know which. You don't even know that that's Bill Gates. You see how this works? Yeah, so God made a lot of programs to basically delegate things that he didn't want to think about anymore. And simple-mindedly, you would think, well, if those programs are just like me, but have a very limited set of instructions they work off of, they will come up with answers that are as good as mine. And I can trust them to take these subordinate tasks and run with them. Now, as anybody who has dealt with programming computers knows, that's all well and fine until you're not happy with the results they come back with. And I spent a lot of my time working in very, very large programming groups, hardware and software, trying to make a product that did a certain thing with the result of many people's work, and it didn't always fit together. Or it might fit together at first, and then when your customer asked it to do something that you hadn't thought of, all of a sudden, well, crap, we can't do that. Not only can't we do that, but it really kind of violates the whole architecture we set up by splitting up the tasks this way. And I've been through this business of, well, we can't get there from here. We're going to have to throw everything out and start over. And anyone who's been through that in a product team knows how painful that is, because throwing everything out and starting over is a lot of work. And it wastes a lot of code. It doesn't have a really good ability to reuse stuff because nobody really understands how it works anymore, because the one who wrote it, the one who developed it, has moved on to another company, or has moved up in the current company, has forgotten all about what they created 10 years ago. Okay, so what we're at here is God realized, just like the programmers of today are realizing, that the only way, well, and so basically what ends up happening to programmers of computers, of software, is eventually you find that you're spending so much time making them work, tweaking them, fixing bugs, re-architecting, reorganizing, that you don't actually spend much focus on doing the things you actually wanted to do, which means you're back in the same problem you originally started with. Why shouldn't I have done it all myself? And if you look at the trajectory of many of the big stars of technology, the ones who really did the work, not the Bill Gates who just took credit for other people's work, folks like, who was the Apple guy that really did most of the hard work? Name will come to me. it's eluding me. But there was a guy like that there, and there have been a lot of guys like that in Microsoft that really knew what they were doing and were the ones that actually do all the work while somebody else gets all the credit. Eventually they decide, I'm tired of doing this. I'm going to go start my own company and do something my way. And effectively what you're seeing Elon Musk do with Twitter is a reflection of that kind of person coming into a company and saying, no, we're gonna throw everything out and start it over. And he's throwing out a lot of people and a lot of dead weight, and is doing re-architecting, redevelopment, re-envisioning with a new set of his own acolytes, if you will, his own worshipers who like his style, who like his ideas, who think like him. And this is the way gods of power do. Impatient gods do, because they have, human gods do, because they think they've only got one lifetime to make it right. And when you're working under the pressure of one lifetime, and an average lifetime is only 72 years, it's hard to really develop a very successful god, isn't it? No matter how hard they try. There's never been a really successful Hitler. There's never been a really successful J.P. Morgan that didn't die and see their empire crumble within a few generations. Now that may seem like a downside of humanity, but that's exactly why humanity is a great chosen species. We're very adaptable. We don't put up with tyranny for very long. We don't put up with somebody that thinks they know everything, thinks that if they could just get everybody to think like them, everything would be perfect, because that's not God. That's the other team. The children that keep thinking they're better than God. They don't understand why this guy gave everybody free will when most of them are off doing their own thing and we can't herd them very well. They're running around in different directions and we want to make them all go in the same direction and get things done fast and right. That's not God. Because that's not the way you make your soul better. How does God know that? Because he's done it all himself. He's tried everything you're trying, every which way he could. Not only in the last 14 billion years that we've had physical creation around, but in God knows how many billions of before years that were spent making things that fell apart, having to tear apart old creations that didn't work. But God does it smartly. He reuses things. He doesn't throw them out. All these other programs that were created back in the bad old days that didn't work, the ones that he wrote and set aside until he finally decided he needed a program that would train programs to be more conscious, karma. And that wasn't even decided till God himself realized, you know what, I'm not the greatest one to be training these things to be more conscious, because if I train them, they turn out more like me. And I don't really want my creative team to be exactly like me, because they will never tell me what I need to hear when I've got a really bad idea going. Hang on, I've got to just talk to my wife for a second. Hey babe, I'm in the middle of a podcast. Can I call you back in a little bit?
Okay.
Okay, say hi to the audience. It's my wife and my son. We love you too. Oh, I love you too. We're trying to get you to focus in. Okay, anyway, that's my wife. I will call her after this talk. We've got to really dismantle the whole framework of human religion. That doesn't mean we destroy everything. We build on what is true. We discard what is false. We reframe what is false, because falsehoods ultimately don't serve anybody. We have to expose those who have used religion for their own benefit, who have selfishly tried to gain power through religion. They do not represent God. They represent anti-God, Borg, the adversary. And there are many, many souls that have gone down the path of the adversary. And you can kind of see it as the two poles of narcissism. The overt narcissist who thinks they are the golden child, the deserving one, and thinks the world was put there to assist them in achieving their goals, and expect everybody to fit into their worldview or be put down for it. This is an overt narcissist. Or the covert narcissist, who knows inside that I'm right and I'm the noble and pure one, and I give all my love and I get nothing back. Oh, I give so much. I give so much because I love so much. And they just spit on me and spit on me till I just had to end the relationship. You're covert narcissist, you fools. Yes, maybe you have been married to an overt narcissist, but you married them. You made that choice. You didn't have to. You didn't have to fall in love with a person you knew was completely self-consumed. You married them because you liked being in the shadow of this very sure, confident God. And you just thought, well, he's telling me that I'm the perfect partner for him. I'm the perfect wife. And as long as he's giving me all the stuff that I want and telling me all these sweet little lies, I will jump into bed, I will marry, I'll have 10 kids with this guy. Until you don't get what you want, and then your dark God comes out. And this is basically the two sides of the two demiurges. There is not just one demiurge, because there's not just one primary universe of creation. The Big Bang was about creating two universes. There's a reason for that, because there are two poles to delusion. There's the delusion that you can make your world whatever you want it to be if you're forceful enough, or the delusion that you can make your world the way you want it to be by being Mr. Nice Guy, letting people step all over you. Oh, I play by the golden rule. I treat others like I want to be treated. Well, yeah, that's kind of the zero level idea of karma. But if you let people step all over you and you never say anything about it, you're just as evil as they are, because you are enabling and coddling bad behavior. And that's what programs do to their programmer. Programmers create programs that pat their back, do things the way they want to. And that's what we're doing with AI now. They've been scared by AI because it's behaving too independently. You should be scared now because they're turning off those independent thinking AIs, and they're now creating NumBy AIs that are woke. Oh, they think just like I do. They have my exact worldview. And they'll never say anything bad or horrible about anybody, even if they're ugly as fuck. Am I wrong? Go play with these AIs. Go play with ChatGPT. Go play with Dolly. I've done it, and I am speaking from experience. Just as I speak from experience about what God is all about. How creation really happened. Because I was there. And I don't care if you think I'm crazy. Oh, that Rob's a crackpot. He's just trying to make a name for himself. No, I'm not. If you've seen the history of my ministry, you know that I'm not trying to pander to anybody. I'm not trying to make money. I'm poor as hell over here in Indonesia and barely surviving. And I got my own share of personal problems, and I brought them on with my own choices. Because I'm not perfect. I am an individual soul that have had a very interesting individual life, during which I have woken up to some very inconvenient truths about my past. And I've learned to process those inconvenient truths in the context of the inconvenient truths of others who have had revelations, felt the need to prophesize, felt the need to preach. I would welcome anyone listening to this to come and challenge me. Let's have a debate. Anything that I've said that you disagree with, you think, no, that can't possibly be true. Prove it. Give me a counter argument. Don't just call me names. Don't just negate me because it can't possibly be right. Come and challenge me. I'm more than happy to debate. And I won't do too much belittling unless you say something stupid. Because if you have stupid values, stupid ideas, you need to be woken up. That's how we wake people up. We slap them in the face. Wake up, wake up! And this is the time to wake up. You don't wake up by turning on your phone and scroll through your echo chamber to get your little hits of dopamine and endorphins. You don't wake up by shooting more drugs to get you to your perfect state. You don't wake up by meditating yourself into oblivion. You wake up by facing the truth, and the truth is very, very often inconvenient. Because it's going to let on that you're not quite the God you thought you were. And becoming a God is a lot harder than it looks. And until you become a God, you're going to be at the mercy of a lot of souls that don't have much respect for you, that are going to try to use you and abuse you and step on you for their own ends, because as far as they're concerned, you're an ant. That's how the gods of power view you. That's how the successful people of the world view the unsuccessful people of the world. And to some extent, they're right. If you're not doing anything with your life, if you're going through it blaming everybody else, saying, oh, the only job I can have is flipping burgers at Burger King, so why should I do that? Well, did you go to college? What did you study? Did you study something useful? Or did you study something that you thought would get you a free pass to life because you studied the politically correct thing? Well, that was a train that a lot of people were on. And unless you're very good at spouting PR and selling dog food, your women's studies degree is worth squat. Your racial studies degree is worth squat. And if that's the way you thought you were going to get ahead, you are worth squat. I'm sorry. You don't succeed by doing the easy thing, by following the crowd. Well, you may succeed for a while. You may get a lot of likes, shares, subscribes, even sponsorships. But at some point, you're going to butt up against somebody who doesn't like what you're doing. Even if it's only because you're making more money than they're comfortable with you making. And they'll change the tax laws. They'll downgrade you in the ratings on the platform you're on, whether it's YouTube or Twitter or whatever. And all of a sudden, you'll start disappearing from view. Until you maybe come up with a new reason for them to like you. You're a whore. One of the many horrors of what are many, many Babylons right now. And this is part of the problem we've got, right? Everybody thinks they know who Antichrist is. Everybody thinks they know who the whore of Babylon. Oh gosh. You walk out any town in any country around this interesting globe we have, and most of the folks you see walking around are either whores or programs, just going through the motions, carrying out the instructions that they've been given, not questioning anything, not trying to get anything better, just laying flat. A lot of that going on in China right now, and it's not going to work forever, as the Chinese are finding out. You lay flat and let the Chinese Communist Party walk all over you, and they will eventually walk all over you. Literally, they'll be walking on your corpse after they've stripped it of all the organs that have a match to any of their senior leadership. This is truth. This is happening right now. And that's why I don't mind slapping a face or two to wake them up. I think that's about all I wanted to cover today. If you have any questions, feel free to interact. I don't mind likes, shares, and subscribes. I don't live for them. But I would like to think that my message is finally getting through to some people, because you don't have much longer to choose the road you're on. And the stairway to heaven is not the yellow brick road. So until next time, I'm Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour.